Ladies and gentlemen, welcome aboard the Wright Flyer. As always, this is your captain, Randy Wright, speaking, and I want to take this opportunity to personally thank you for choosing to fly the friendly airwaves with us here at Radio Aviation Excellence, the Wright Flyer. Now, without any further ado, let's go ahead and delve into this program's topic. Well, folks, it's getting interesting. And the reason I say it's getting interesting is because when we look at Kenosha, Wisconsin, we are reminded of just exactly what transpired throughout the Kyle Rittenhouse case. And there's been an interesting development with his friend who had purchased the firearm for him. So, the attorney for the man who purchased the rifle for Kyle Rittenhouse signed a plea agreement with the state of Wisconsin to dismiss two felony charges against him. Now, should the judge sign off on this, Dominick Black's plea deal will result in a non-criminal citation according to these court documents, and this was filed on Friday. What's important to note here also is that he'll be required to pay a fine of $2,000. Now, why this is important is because we see here that Dominick Black was one of the primary witnesses that was used by Thomas Binger in an attempt to basically create the narrative that he had for his case. And the narrative that he was putting forth was that there was this white supremacist militia determined to go to Kenosha, Wisconsin, in order to stir up trouble at the height of the fiery but mostly peaceful protests. Of course, this is laughable nonsense and drivel because they were actually just caring members of the community who wanted to go out and provide aid and support for their town, which was in the grips of fiery anarchy and chaos. Of course, the left wants us to believe that Kyle Rittenhouse had broken some law by crossing state lines and that he was a minor in possession of a dangerous firearm. And of course, while Wisconsin did have this statute on the book, the gun charge was ultimately overturned during the trial process. Again, it just shows that the district attorney in this case, both Kraus and Binger, were very corrupt. And it showed throughout the trial that they were very corrupt. They made numerous violations of the Constitution. One of the biggest, the one that had brought the judge's wrath and ire out, was when Assistant District Attorney Thomas Binger had made comment on Rittenhouse's silence, which is your Fifth Amendment right. That's why whenever you are Mirandized, the first thing is you have the right to remain silent. That right, of course, is your Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination. And that was being violated by Binger. But the other thing that Binger was doing was attempting to apply pressure to Rittenhouse's close friend, Derek Black, to essentially dangle these felonious charges over his head so that he would cop a plea deal. And that's what happened here. It happens all the time in criminal law, but there's also the sign here that what the district attorney was doing was a dog and pony show, that it was smoke and mirrors and parlor tricks. that essentially they were dangling these charges over Dominick Black's head in the hopes of flipping him against his friend so that they could then erect their false and corrupt narrative that has no place in an open, honest, but above all free society, and that they were putting, in fact, self-defense on trial during the course of that case. It's disgusting. It's an ugly thing to see, but it's exactly what Binger and Krauss were doing. And it's why they had that false narrative. And it goes in line also with the way that they had attempted to paint their own star witness, that man who was there and had been lying about what he was doing, the one who had a gun himself. And of course, his name is eluding me at the moment, but it was important. It was important because they were trying to paint him off as being a trained paramedic, that he was right to be there, but because he was part of a communistical group that was associated with Black Lives Matters. So you see, the narrative was to pick apart Kyle Rittenhouse's story and to paint those who had gone there with the wanton desire to spread chaos, to destroy businesses, because they had been rioting and destroying property and looting day in and day out. They wanted to create this two-dimensional story in order to say that Rittenhouse was guilty for defending his life. They were saying that he was recklessly endangering people. And part of the way that they were doing this was through the narrative that they were forcing Dominick Black to go into. And it wasn't necessarily a strong case for them, as it turns out. Of course it wasn't, because Rittenhouse was found not guilty on all counts. But again, this goes to show, with respect to Dominick Black, he was charged in 2020 on 2 counts of providing a firearm to a minor. He purchased the AR-15 for Rittenhouse, who was 17 years old at the time. And they were trying to say that, Rittenhouse was too young to purchase the gun legally at the time. Again, that's violative of the Constitution, but it's very hard to make that one stick, particularly with the way that the states have been a patchwork with respect to their laws on that. I'm hoping that that will eventually change. We're certainly working on changing that. But we see that back in May, Dominick Black had pleaded not guilty to the charges. His attorneys had argued that it was legal for Rittenhouse to possess a gun. It was not necessarily a crime for Black to give him one. In other words, if it was legal for him to possess the gun, which it is. Again, that was Thomas Binger and Krauss playing fast and loose with the law in order to force their narrative and their agenda down our throats, and for the purpose of basically pigeonholing Dominick Black to force him to testify against his friend. And we see now that both felonies are going to be dismissed, and he will receive a non-criminal citation. And personally, I think that non-criminal citation ought to be thrown out as well. Because again, this is just the corrupt district attorney's office in Kenosha, Wisconsin, doing everything within their power to at least latch on to something. In other words, they feel as though they still are justified in this when the black letter law is against them. and the ruling of a jury of Rittenhouse's peers had found that no crime had been committed. Here's the thing. We've seen a pattern with respect to the Democrats and with respect to these district and assistant district attorneys who have been catching and releasing the rioters. It's a double standard, and it is the same narrative that we have seen play out time and again to the point of it reaching ad nauseum. They have been causing people to fear, to protect themselves. And we even saw it with that Missouri couple that happened to be attorneys when the rioters were marching and broke down the doors. I believe their names were the McCloskeys, something down the line of that. It's been a while. But anyway, we saw that they were even facing criminal charges for defending their property. Ladies and gentlemen, what these people want is for you to be afraid to defend your life. They want you to submit to the mob. They want mob justice. That is exactly the message and argument that Assistant District Attorney Thomas Binger made throughout the entirety of that trial. Thankfully, the jury was not intimidated, despite many instances of attempted juror and jury intimidation, and they voted based on what the evidence showed. And like it or not, the evidence showed that the prosecutor, the government, the state, was unable to prove their case beyond a reasonable doubt. And it's very important that we allow that with the presumption of innocence, that we hold the government to that higher standard, given the near limitless resources that they have at their disposal. Because you can see, based off of even this development, that they will use dirty and underhanded tactics and strategies, little tricks, parlor tricks, smoke and mirrors, to attempt to divide and conquer. Ladies and gentlemen, this is why it is absolutely important that we ensure that our court systems remain fair, and that we call out and root out those who would go out of their way to manipulate the law and to twist these things for their own dark, twisted, and dare I say, diabolical purposes. The future of our country rests with us. It rests on our shoulders to ensure that our freedoms, our liberties, our privileges, and our immunities remain intact, because we are going up against the Thomas Bingers and the Krauses of the world, who had the gall to stand up there and knowingly violate the constitutional rights of an accused. And in our legal system, if they can do it to one person, they can do it to all people. It is for that very reason that we expect the court system and the judiciary to be an adversarial system. It requires that we stand up to these things. And that is why it is so very important that these charges against Black have been dropped. Dominick Black committed no crime, and neither did Kyle Rittenhouse. And it is high past time that we call out these corrupt, conniving district and assistant district attorneys who attempt to violate the Constitution. That case should have never been brought. But conniving Democrat district attorneys brought it and attempted to eliminate constitutional rights, thereby abridging the rights of all of us, not just of Rittenhouse and Dominick Black. This is a good development. I still wish that he didn't have to pay the civil infraction. I would fight that pretty hard. But at this point, I can also understand that he's probably at wit's end and is just ready for this chapter to go behind him, or to be put behind him. Either way, ladies and gentlemen, we can see that the district attorney's office in Kenosha, Wisconsin, was defeated thoroughly in their attempts to abridge the constitutional rights of Rittenhouse and Black. Thank you for tuning in for this program. I hope to see you next time. Please do take care. I'll be seeing you.